and welcome to AI Geo Navigators podcast. I'm Faiza, your host, and today we have a guest named Hadia Nusrat. She's a gender advisor with 25 years of experience. Hello, ma'am. How are you?
Hello, assalamu alaikum. I'm fine, thank you. Alhamdulillah.
Thank you, ma'am, for joining us today. Okay, ma'am. So starting from your journey, आपका 25 years का different diverse experience है. आपने मॉन्टेसरी में टीचिंग भी की है. उसके बाद आपने फुल ब्राइट स्कॉलरशिप पे लेके आपने different जगहों पे स्टडी की. और आपका एक बहुत डाइवर्स एक्सपीरियंस है जेंडर स्टडीज में. आप एक सीनियर जेंडर एडवाइजर हैं. तो अगर आप हमें अपनी जर्नी में लेके जाएं, कैसे आपने स्टार्ट किया, क्या आपका एक्सपीरियंस रहा, कैसा रहा, किन जगहों पे आपने किया?
Thank you very much. Meri ibtida it started off by being born in Kuwait. So it was an unusual origins, but beautiful nevertheless. Then, as tradition has it, I was married very young, and I had two children when I was still fairly young. I was just I had just done my FSC when I got married, and then I managed to do my BA before my children were born. But between that time and my first master's, it took 16 years of being a professional with just a bachelor's degree and working in various fields. तो सैर सपाटे तो कुछ इस तरह से शुरू हुए कि from traveling between Kuwait and Pakistan, of course. But after I got married, I traveled intensively. I was in Bangkok, Hong Kong, Malaysia. Um, a lot of I went to the UK for the first time. So as a young single parent, I realized I wanted my children to experience the diversity within Pakistan. That's all I could afford at the time. So I took them on a train journey to Quetta. Our train got stalled in a place called Abegum, which is very correct because वहाँ पर पानी नाम की चीज नहीं थी. Or and I was I started teaching Montessori before that because I just couldn't be separated from my children. So I asked my school principal that, can you give me a job here as well? And it turned out I was a good teacher. And she trained me on the Montessori method, which is an amazing method. You can have a separate podcast about Montessori.
Sure.
So I was very privileged in that sense. I always had good advice. It's like I always had guardian angels, and my two little children who were devils and angels both at the same time took me on a very diversified journey. However, once I joined the development sector, I I realized very quickly that what I used to question as I was going through my life journey as a single parent, it was happening for real. Everybody needed to question, why is this happening? Why am I not being included in this discussion? Where is my right to decide? Where are the choices that I can choose from? So all of these things came up. And I think when you ask me of who inspired me, actually my daughter inspired me because she was born in a non-conformist household. She saw a mother who was a single parent. And so she would always ask questions. I wouldn't always have the answers. I once had a t-shirt that said, because I'm the mom, that's why. Meaning some questions just stop. You don't ask questions anymore. But that did not stop her. She was the one who once wrote for her Islamiyat assignment when she was asked, who's your favorite prophet and why? She said, my favorite prophet is Hazrat Maryam. And she got a 0 on her assignment. And she wept and she argued and she said, why is she not a prophet? I didn't have the answer back then. But I could see the feminist in her asking for the right place of women in the world. All prophets were born of mothers. So, except for Hazrat Adam. But they are all worth mentioning. We have the greatest impact on the adult's life. The mother has the greatest impact. So my journey took me to many places after I joined the sector. Not only did I travel the length and breadth of our beautiful Pakistan, and it just makes my heart bleed when I see the floods now surpassing the 2022 floods. People were saying this is biblical, this is a mega flood. Now my heart just breaks. But I learned while I was in the development sector that it is the women that you work with in the villages. They are your inspiration. They are true, resilient human beings. They know how to survive with the least and the most. And they are so easily made happy. They are, they're just amazing people. Our Pakistani women in the grassroots, at the rural level, at the village level, they are amazing individuals. So my inspiration came from them, and also my drive to work in this field came from that. So as I was telling you, I did my first master's 16 years after my graduation. So it's a lesson. Do not give up. Your time will come. And this after I did my master's in development studies from Iqra University, my class fellows were just like a few years older than my children. But I applied for a Fulbright scholarship again. God bless my mentors who said, Hadia, go for it. And I was suffering so much self-doubt. How will I get a scholarship? I'm too old. And I did. And I captured that scholarship. It took 3 tries of getting my GRE score at the right place, but I got my scholarship. I went to Washington, D.C., which was amazing. At the same time, my children had also moved to the US and they were also studying. So when they would ever come back to me and say, Mom, you don't know how tough it is to be in the US, I said, don't you give me that. I'm also studying here and I know how tough it is. And just a little side note, talking about technology, we are on an AI Geo podcast. Uh, I came from the period where I used to be afraid to press the on button of a CPU, of a computer, because it would make these sounds, the machine would rev up and I would say, oh my God, it's going to explode, and I would switch it off. And when I took my first course in computers back in 1995, and I would do this, my instructor would say, you will destroy the machine. Let it start up. It's like they didn't know that we will come to this kind of technology where it would be soundless and swift. But I'm such a dinosaur coming from that era, but I appreciate making this journey. I may not be able to be as speedy now. I can see that I'm lagging behind, but truly my humanitarian journey and my journey of learning has been a remarkable one. I studied public health at George Washington University because my first development job was with a health-based organization, and it was a rights-based organization. It was about consumer rights, and they wanted, they had 2 publications, and I was the assistant editor to the Urdu publication. And my children were deeply involved in everything I was doing. I was supporting a breastfeeding protection campaign, and we're privileged to work with great artists like Anwar Anwar Maqsood, the poet, who wrote about breast milk and saying that ये डब्बा कैसा डब्बा है, ये दूध के नाम पे धब्बा है, meaning why do mothers not breastfeed, and why do uh, women not why do women fall into the trap of the commercial push of formula milk? खैर, बहुत जगहों पे travel किया. I was counting with a friend just recently that I have traveled to 26 different countries. In my work alone, I have traveled to India, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Bangkok, Philippines, Malaysia, Nepal. And of course, I've also worked in Syria, I've worked in Sudan, I've worked in the Philippines and in Afghanistan, and I'm currently working in Somalia.
Oh, ma'am, it's so inspiring to hear such a diverse background, such a diverse countries, like from India to Somalia, like such a huge, big culture difference, let alone culture itself and security and everything, resources. Uh, like for me, a young girl, इतना diverse culture and इतनी inspiring stories सुनने के बाद, I'm so motivated. Okay, so moving forward, मैम आपने डिफरेंट जगहों पे काम किया, डिफरेंट तरह का काम किया, तो अगर मैं आपसे क्लाइमेट रिलेवेंट काम पूछूं, जैसे आपने मेंशन किया 2022 का फ्लड आया और उसमें डिफरेंट इमरजेंसी रिस्पॉन्स होता है जेंडर बेस्ड, या हम अगर जेंडर एंड इंक्लूजन की बात करें, तो अगर आप इस पर थोड़ा सा हमें बताएंगे किस तरह 2022 के फ्लड में जेंडर एंड इंक्लूजन पर किस तरह का इमरजेंसी रिस्पॉन्स देखा गया?
I would like Faiza to take you a few steps back. Pakistan is not new to calamities. And I think for most people in a living memory, the 2005 earthquake is quite fresh. Would you not say? Do you remember the 2005 earthquake?
I was only 1 year old at that time.
Oh my God, okay. All right. So you may not recall that, but that earthquake actually brought in a new system of humanitarian response globally, because just prior to the 2005 earthquake, we had the 2004 Asian tsunami, which killed over 100,000 people. So even our earthquake killed something close to that. The Pakistan, Kashmir, India, Afghanistan earthquake. But we introduced something called the cluster system. The humanitarians, the UN, introduced something called the cluster system. इसका मतलब ये था कि हर इन मुख्तलिफ अक़साम की रिस्पॉन्स मुख्तलिफ UN agencies अपने ज़िम्मे ले लेती थी. मसलन food rested with World Food Program and Food and Agriculture Organization. The UNICEF took on water and sanitation, nutrition, education, and child protection. WHO took on health, और उनका एक subsection था maternal health. UNFPA took on a subsector of preventing gender-based violence. इस तरीके से ये बहुत सारे clusters बन गए. Clusters, sub-clusters. फिर ज़रूरत पड़ी, the need was के working groups भी होने चाहिए, because sometimes these clusters don't talk to each other. And so we had intersecting working groups. So we had to have, we had a gender working group. We had, as things evolved, there was the need for prevention of sexual abuse, sexual exploitation and abuse. क्योंकि ये सामने आ रहा था कि हम लोगों का ख्याल होता है ना, that in humanitarian circumstances, humanity and nobility is at its highest. It is. But so is the absence of humanity and the absence of nobility, because people are facing crisis, they are easy to exploit. So sexual exploitation and abuse was also very apparent, where service providers were exploiting those to whom they were providing services. So we had to have these intersecting working groups as well. And many other came up, for example, assessment working group. And here I will stress, all action has to be informed. So humanitarian action needs information. आप जरा गौर करें. Listen to the news and see. They'll say so many people killed, so many people displaced, so many cubics of water, so many hectares of land, so many livestock. It doesn't give you an adequate picture of the so many people displaced, there will be people with disabilities. There will be people who are minorities. There will be, so you can see that their vulnerability status will be higher. There will be households that only have women head because maybe father has been killed, or the adult male has been injured or killed. So that's where I realized that humanitarian action is failing, abysmally failing the affected population. And I felt so proud that I was working with UN Women and they had deployed me with UN OCHA, which is the Humanitarian Coordination Organization. That is where all the assessments happen. And they also, at that time, back in 2010, that is when the NDMA came into existence. It transferred from being ERA, which is the Earthquake Response Authority, to the NDMA. They got a lot of help. And UN Women was also born in 2010. So a lot of it was a perfect storm to bring good forces together. But organizations are headed by men. The NDMA was headed by a military personnel at that time, and I think still continues to be. And we understand that we need our military personnel on the ground to be rescuers. But one of the big uh, conditions for a response is do no harm and leave no one behind. What happens when you only have men responding? The men of the affected population will say, you can't touch our women. And I have documented these stories where response had to be done in the darkness of the night because the men felt that we can't ask military men to help our women. And so they would have to be covered, and only then could they be assisted. This is in one location in Pakistan. So we need more women responders. Don't women respond when a flood hits? Don't they pick up a goat and a baby and put a gatri on their head of whatever they could gather? Do you think they have any lack of strength? They may lack organization. They may not know what exactly to do and where to go. So why can we not have more women responders as part of Pakistan's response team? Why can we not also train the women in the villages? What do you do on the first onset of a disaster? This kind of forward thinking is missing in Pakistan, and it continues to be missing. For a while, uh, I was talking about humanitarian organizations. They don't collect the data that will give you information. They only give you data of what has been lost and what should immediately be replaced so that people don't continue to die. So medicines, shelter, hygiene kits. But what good is a hygiene kit if you don't have the privacy to use it or the privacy to dispose of it? So you see, disasters are consistently being mismanaged because they are completely a man-made disaster. Because in every other country in the world where disasters are affect, and especially if you look at the countries of the north, the developed countries, their women have a voice. Here, our women don't have a voice, and they make sure that nobody is left behind. They dare not leave anybody behind. They'd be faced with litigation. Here we keep flagging, this is the international humanitarian law, this is the international human rights law. It doesn't um, it doesn't match with the thinking. So humanitarians really have to understand the law and understand what are you committing to do when you are taking on the responsibility of being a humanitarian. जिस तरह से हम डॉक्टर्स को कहते हैं ना, अच्छा आपने और क्या क्या सर्टिफिकेट, हम देखते हैं ये MBBS है, फिर उसके बाद और क्या क्या उनकी क्रेडेंशियल्स हैं. Our credentials are that we should be committed to doing no harm, commitment to understanding and reporting sexual exploitation and abuse, understanding the international humanitarian law, and understanding human rights, because women are human, persons with disabilities are human, they have human rights, minorities are human, transgender are human, they have human rights that need to be protected. This current response has failed the country.
मैम आपने बिल्कुल सही कहा, आपने बहुत ही की रूट कॉजेज आइडेंटिफाई किए पाकिस्तान में रिस्पॉन्स से रिलेवेंट, जैसे आपने कहा कि women को टच एंड ऑल दैट थिंग्स. अभी पाकिस्तान में आई गेस 2022 से ज्यादा एक वर्स्ट सिचुएशन अफेक्ट की. तो अगर आप उन्हीं की लेसन्स को आइडेंटिफाई करें जो आपने आइडेंटिफाई की है फॉर मेन एंड वुमेन, फॉर एंड पर्टिकुलर जेंडर एंड इंक्लूजन के साथ, अगर आप हमें बताएं माइनॉरिटीज के रिस्पेक्ट बताएं किस तरह उनकी लेसन्स को अभी के जो अभी का जो कल्चर है इसमें यूटिलाइज करके बेटर रिस्पॉन्स रिस्क
Development funding used to be more than humanitarian funding. Development funding was supposed to make the bones of the country strong, and humanitarian funding would come in as a band-aid. Now, humanitarian funding is more because the need is so much, and development funding is becoming less and less. So our bones are weak, our institutions are weak, our method of thinking, of research, of strengthening our institutions and our skilled staff is weak. And upon that, we have lots of band-aids. Band-aids will not fix governance, which is weak. What development does is that it builds good governance, good institutions, equity and equality, so that when a crisis hits, all of those things, that is your immune system, it can respond. When you have zero immune system, you are constantly putting band-aids, giving injections, which will not strengthen a very weak body. So I think that in this one, it's not lost. You can still reach out through the National Humanitarian Network, through different INGO forums. You can talk to the donors and say, please, let's do something different this time. Make sure that your funding goes 50% to women-led organizations, women-specific activities. You save a woman, you save the family. So remember that. And research has proven this, that right now 80% of the affected people, if not more, will be women, children, elderly, and persons with disability. And disability is not, just a person in a wheelchair. Disability is also mental disabilities, cognitive disabilities, people who need to be assisted constantly. The level of care is higher. And we did a very interesting survey in then the FATA areas in 2015, where I had a very good colleague, and sometimes some miracles happen because of colleagues. And he assisted in ensuring that data was disaggregated. The key headlines were that there are more males in households with disability. And the greatest disability is physical. Then there's sensory, like sight, speech, hearing. Often speech and hearing are connected, but speech can also be connected to cognitive disabilities, to mental disabilities. Women, females were half of that number. But it was the women respondents who said, we need more services for persons with disabilities. The male respondents did not prioritize services for persons with disability. The women ask for services for persons with disability. Why? Because it is the women who take care of them. In humanitarian standards, there is a principle when developing uh, latrines in a camp, make sure you make more latrines for women, because it is the women who will also take the elderly, the disabled persons in the household, and the children to the latrines. Then, for prevention of gender-based violence, make sure that the area is illuminated. Very interesting anecdote from Rahimia Khan. I was there training, and I said, "How did the response go?" And the women said, "Please, next time when you establish a camp, the only light shouldn't be just in the women's latrine. There should be lights elsewhere." Because all the men were sitting under that light near the women's latrine. You see, we are doing harm. If we don't talk to the people, if they are not involved, then we will not be able to come up with solutions. And this is what I learned in the Philippines. This is my last deployment was in the Philippines. Now, Philippines, of course, the advantage is women have a voice, but it's not as if they don't face gender-based violence and they don't face exclusion. But they have a very strong community system. So, and fortunately, the humanitarian system was going through a reset at the time. There was a new humanitarian response coordinator, Martin Griffiths, and he said, the one prior to Tom Fletcher, he said, let's flip the humanitarian system. Let it be community driven. Wow, humanitarian response driven by the community? It was not easy for the big agencies to swallow, because, I mean, everybody has a shop. So everyone's shop, I'm sorry to say, and I bow to the great experts that sit around us in the United Nations. Everything runs on money. But when you talk to the communities, they have local solutions. You talk to the women, they will say, this is where the water has always come in from. This is how we feel threatened. When you talk to the men, they say, our livestock is always impacted. The women will also say, I try and save the chickens and goats because what will we eat? But how much can I do that? So, and sometimes and I did this interview, I asked the women in Kashmir, which is often hit by disasters. I said, what will you do if the rains are as bad as 2010? This is in 2011. They said, we will hold the Quran on our heads. Now, they don't know how to read the Quran. And we will pray to Allah, please don't let this rain fall. I said, okay, do that. Then what next? What if the rain still comes? And they were quite clueless, because they've not been empowered to think this way. They said, we'll gather our children and whatever we can. Good thinking. Maybe you can have it prepared. Maybe you can also have a means of alerting each other and not just look inwards at your family. So you have to work with community organizations, locally led response. Do you think the Philippines has not seen its share of humanitarian destruction? It is constantly hit by typhoons, constantly. And I've been there. Their houses are made of wood and bamboo. They fly. They are shelterless. But they have a rule in their country. It is called Banahiyan. Banahiyan means helping each other, no matter at what cost to yourself. That is such, and they said, you humanitarians, you come in and you start distributing things, and our Banahiyan is eroded, because then everybody wants to take whatever you're bringing. Otherwise, whatever we had, we'd share. We'd work to build each other's houses. But now you come up with your shelter kits, and so we just wait for it. So humanitarian response has to be driven by the communities. Work with our local organizations. Pakistan is very well organized. Everybody's on the NADRA electoral rolls. The community is very important during elections. Everybody knows where our voters lie. But what happens when a humanitarian crisis strikes? Why is there no understanding of how many women are in this area? How many women can be trained to be part of local humanitarian response? I could go on forever.
Okay, ma'am. So concluding all your response of that question, I guess equality is more important than equality is more important than equity. No, equity is more important than equality.
I'll tell you the difference. So let's not get confused. Equality is like the ultimate goal. Ultimate goal. And just yesterday, I was reading in the Quran, man and woman has been mentioned equal amounts of time, equal number of time. So, sometimes scrolling and listening to certain reels is good. I would have to confirm. I do have an app that can help me check how many times has Rajul been mentioned and how many times Nisa has been mentioned. But equality is the natural state. When a child is born, a girl and a boy, we decide that this child will wear pink and this child will wear blue. We already start to discriminate between them. And equality is the ultimate goal. It's actually the divine goal. But equity is the way you get there, are the processes that you use to create equality. So don't confuse it. One is a goal, one is a process. Equity is the process. You create equitable measures, processes to bring equality. And equality in Pakistan would be that at least the women are consulted. If the women and men are consulted equally, they are given the same opportunity, meaning you don't say, okay, we had 15 women and 15 men. Do you think the women will talk in front of 15 men? They will not. Not just in Pakistan, anywhere in the world. In the Philippines, it was kind of the reverse. We had some conversations with them together, and when we separated and spoke to the men confessed they are under a huge stress. Their women nag them, provide. So where do we provide from? We don't have, there's no jobs, there's no markets, our livelihood is destroyed. How do we provide? So whatever little money they get, they spend it off in their smokes and their drinks. And then the women get more upset. Why did you spend it on that? You could have brought that money to me. So the women say, give us our own separate sources of income so that we don't have to rely on them. but men get distressed too, please. They are humans. They are emotional. They get distressed too.
ओके सो मूविंग फॉरवर्ड, अगर जैसे आपने पहले डिस्कस किया था, आपने मॉन्टेसरी में भी पढ़ाया है एंड जस्ट बिकॉज ऑफ योर चिल्ड्रंस एंड यू आर अ ग्रेट टीचर. सो इफ आई आस्क कि आपने 2000 नंबर ऑफ यूएन पर्सन पीस कीपर्स को, लोकल लीडर्स को ट्रेन किया है, तो व्हाट इज द डिफरेंस बिटवीन अ चाइल्ड एंड अ यूएन पीस कीपर स्पेसिफिकली, एंड देन व्हाट इज योर मोस्ट मेमोरेबल मेमोरी फ्रॉम दैट ट्रेनिंग?
I love teaching, and I love teaching younger children. They are the stars of my eyes. I just love it. They are like sponges. They will drink everything that you tell them. And since I've seen that happen, I expected the same when I started teaching in the university. And it is how you tell the story that you can make somebody drink. I remember when I would read stories in my Montessori class, and storytelling was not a practice. But I asked my principal, can I read them stories? Because I used to read to my children. So when I would read stories and I would look up at them, if it was a sad story, my voice would also quiver. And if I'd look up at the children, their lips were like, and I would say, oh my God, I should make it happier. I shouldn't upset them. So, of course, our children's stories always have a happy ending, but they make you think. When I was teaching at university level, I had to shock them. But I didn't really have to shock them. Teaching at Quaid-e-Azam University, the students there come from diverse backgrounds. And when I would say, speak of a horrific story of gender inequality, they would say, you know, ma'am, it happened in our village. And then the stories would start flowing. And I didn't have to teach them. They were already learning. You just have to plant the seed to think. What teachers must do is make you think, make you question. And this is what I tried with the peacekeepers. Now it's a very controlled environment. They're all military personnel. Sometimes their seniors are there in the room. But I used to do different exercises. I have an exercise called the rattle box. I shake the box and I say, what do you hear? And they're all these smart sort of military personnel who are going to be deployed to difficult countries. They know with authority. They say, it's bullets. Okay. It's a woman shaking a box. You think I'll have bullets in it? Think about it. Okay. Jewelry. I said, a woman would shake her jewelry like that? Think about it. And so, I really made them think. And what I had, then I would open the box and I'd write what they would say. So they would say pebbles, stones, clips. So I'd write it down. Then I'd open the box and I'd say, okay, now have a look at it, but don't touch. You can't touch it. You can just look at it. And they'd pass the box around. And obviously things are hidden one under the other. So they would come up with another list. And then I'd put it out on a tray and I'd say, now you can touch that, take it apart, etc. So they would take it apart, they'd look at it, and the list would become really long. And I'd keep writing what they're saying. And I'd say, okay, now look at what you said when you just heard. Do you see any of those items in the remaining lists of see and feel? So the best ability to respond as a peacekeeper is to feel what others are going through, not to just hear and respond. If you went to a donor and you said, often it was just like 10% was accurate on just hearing. If you went to a donor and said, we have 10% accurate information and we're ready to respond, do you think anybody will give you money to respond with just 10% accurate information? They wouldn't. So feel, because that is where you will get the best accuracy. That is how I train peacekeepers. The interesting thing about training peacekeepers was that sometimes we would get peacekeepers from other countries. So we sometimes had European peacekeepers, sometimes peacekeepers from the Asia and Pacific region. And when I would ask them about what are the attributes of women and men, the Europeans would say they're the same. But when we talk to our Pakistani peacekeepers and say, okay, what are the attributes of women and what are the attributes of men? And I would write them down and I would draw a picture of a man or a woman. And they would be guided by the pictures. But they would say that women are emotional, women are indecisive, women are, and I would say, okay, come on, women have to have some good qualities too. And then said, okay, they manage the houses really well, they are good caretakers of children. I said, okay. And for men, they are decisive, they are leaders, they are unemotional. And then I'd flip the pictures and I'd say, tell me, where are the most poets in the world, women or men? And they would say, men. I said, the most artists that are renowned, are they men or women? Men. So how is it that it is the women who are emotional? The men are emotional too. They write the most heartbreaking poetry. So, you cannot put men and women in boxes. The only things that are different between a man and a woman is our biology. That is the only thing that's different. And yes, because of that, there are certain vulnerabilities and we have to safeguard them. And when we safeguard them, we always think about female reproductive health. Males have reproductive health and rights too. You will rarely hear that. So, in conclusion, I enjoyed teaching anybody and everybody. And I love training. But I also love advising, guiding systems, and trying to make a little difference in the way the system works. The system is very stubborn. People don't like to separate the data to look at women and men respondents differently, because it adds a little more work, and it doesn't really add any more money. But the truth is, donors will give you more money if you understand the difference between how the men and the women are affected, how minorities and persons with disabilities are affected, how trans population and other excluded groups are affected. Donors will give you more money. So do the hard work. You will get more money for specific work that will build back better. It will be building back the bones, and you will not be doing the band-aid anymore.
Okay, ma'am. अभी आपने advice का particular mention किया कि you love to give advices. So, given the increasing scale of climate-related emergencies or calamities, like you mentioned, Philippines calamities and current flood situations in Pakistan. So, specifically, what gives you hope in that situations, and how about you give a piece of advice to our listeners?
To our listeners, I would say that let everyone's voice be heard. Make sure that when you look at numbers like so many people killed, ask how many of them were women and how many men? How many were children? How many were elderly women, elderly men? This kind of analysis happened back in 2004 in the tsunami. Somebody was doing a sensible bit of work. They did sex and age disaggregation, and they discovered that the majority of people killed in that tsunami were 70% were women or female. And when they did an age disaggregation, the highest number of deaths were they didn't do the sex disaggregation, of persons under the age of 10 and persons above the age of 70. You see how you can make a difference. Read reports about disaggregation, read reports about tailored response where you can build back better and that you don't keep asking for money for band-aids. I would advise people, let this not happen again. Not that the rains will not happen again. The disaster is when you are impacted. The hazard always exists. It's based on how vulnerable you are, and as ignorant you are more vulnerable. And as prepared you are more ready. So my advice is be ready for the next one. It is going to be bigger and worse. It's not going to get easier. But if you are prepared, you will know how to save yourself and your family and your assets.
All right, ma'am. It's such a wonderful advice. So moving forward to our rapid fire round, इसमें basically हमारे पास कुछ statements हैं. आपको just click जो भी चीज आपके mind में करेगी आपको वो बोलना होगा. So any best advice you heard or like somebody gave you?
For me, I think the best one was read. I was not a reader, so read. I was forced to read because of my work. And so this is what was given to me, but I will add to that. Read and question. Don't stop at just reading.
Me too, ma'am. I'm not a good reader as well. So it's an advice for me as well. Okay, so moving forward, any memorable place you visited regarding your work?
I would think the most memorable was in the Philippines. I lived under the shadow of an active volcano. Thank God it did not explode, because many of the Philippines volcanoes do become active. It was an active volcano because every night you would see the ambers flowing down. So I was writing to a friend and I was saying, and the name of the volcano is Mayon. So I wrote to her and I said, I'm living in the Philippines and I have Mayon volcano in my backyard. He says, oh, I hope I have my own volcano. I said, no, it's not my own. It's Mayon. The volcano is called Mayon. So that was beautiful. Philippines was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful.
Okay, ma'am. No, it's Mayon volcano. Okay, so any underrated skill you think for a humanitarian advisor?
Well, underrated. I didn't quite understand that question, but I think disaggregating data is considered useless, waste of time. It needs to be disaggregated.
All right, so any dream destination country?
Any place where you can hear the sound of water, whether it, unfortunately in Pakistan right now, you can probably hear it everywhere, but in a more relaxing sense, where you're not threatened by it. Waves. I really enjoyed my time being able to come to the sea. If ever I go to Karachi and Karachi doesn't have the best beaches, I always try and go and say salam at the beach, because it is a miracle we live in this world and we have such beautiful places. So the beach is a favorite place, especially if you can drink coconut water. So Philippines.
All right, ma'am. But remember, in Philippines, there are a number of volcanoes as well. So if I ask you to finish the sentence, if I could change one humanitarian sector overnight, what would it be?
It would be more women from the villages at leadership position. Let them lead. Enough. This world has been history. Let it be her story. Let them lead.
All right, ma'am. Any advice for wrap-up advice for our listeners?
I would say keep your gender lenses on. When I remove my glasses, I can't read. So if I put my glasses back on, I can see clearly. Keep your gender lens on. Try and look for inequality. Try and look for ways that you can create equity, the pathways of equity, so that equality is created.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was so inspiring to listen to your story from active volcanoes, from teaching Montessori students, and up to UN speakers and military personnel, especially. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for sharing your inspiring stories with us. And yeah, that's all from our side. Thank you so much for our listeners for enjoying. And if you enjoy, do like and subscribe as well. And that's all from our side. Allah Hafiz from AI Geo Navigators podcast.
Thank you. Allah Hafiz.